We've all seen it happen. The smartest person you work with suddenly does the stupidest thing. Your CEO makes an uncharacteristically boneheaded move that sets the company on the wrong path. Or a coworker who usually does no wrong starts doing nothing right. The toxic force behind these business blunders is fear, and it's the biggest enemy of your success. Hi everyone, I'm Terrace Wayner, and welcome to A Case Study in Fear. In each episode, I'll do the forensics to better understand how and why fear transforms brave leaders of thriving companies into spineless failures of corporate catastrophes. All so you never do. And while most know the names of failures like Blockbuster, Tower Records, Sears, and Toys R Us, what most don't know is that the true mastermind behind their collapse was fear. Today's episode is about Kodak, and it's a wild ride. Once known for inventing the future, this picture-perfect company let fear turn them into a distant memory in a flash. But before we dive into the downfall, I think it's important to remind everyone what a dominant force Kodak was. Let me start with the simple fact that Kodak democratized photography. They gave us the Brownie, the very first inexpensive camera, and suddenly photography was affordable to everyone for the first time in history. When NASA needed a stereoscopic camera to capture the moon landing, they called Kodak. The company's marketing was equally as brilliant. They branded our life's most important memories as Kodak moments, and they dominated the market. For decades, 9 out of 10 rolls of film sold in America were made by Kodak. Then the company made an industry-altering invention that was so big, it could have positioned Kodak to be sitting next to companies like Microsoft, Apple, and Google. Picture this: Kodak's research lab, Rochester, New York, 1975. A young engineer named Steve Sasson walks into his boss's office carrying what looks like a big toaster with a lens. He called it the box. It was 8 pounds of circuit boards, wires, and pure innovation. It was the world's first digital camera. The images are a grainy black and white and only about 0.01 megapixels. Terrible by today's standards, but remember, this is 1975. It was an analog world. Digital anything was seen as a novelty. Now you would think this moment would be celebrated at Kodak. After all, this was the company that put cameras in all of our hands and made pictures and photo albums part of our lives. But the reaction was exactly the opposite. When Kodak Chief Intellectual Property Officer Timothy Lynch saw Sasson's digital invention, he said, "Take that box and go away. We don't ever want to see it again." Another Kodak executive told the engineer, "Your invention is cute, just don't ever show it to anyone." Here's the thing. Despite Kodak being a company with a strong innovation culture, it was also a culture of comfort. And comfort is a perfect breeding ground for fear, especially the fear of change. Kodak's identity and pride were deeply rooted in its traditional business model centered around selling camera film and photographic paper. And one of the most influential groups within Kodak, the marketing department, helped craft the emotional story of what Kodak stood for. They had everyone, including those working within the company, believing that Kodak film was the memory keeper of every important life moment. So the mere thought of changing this successful model violated everything they believed. So the marketing team piled on and fought the future of photography, telling Sasson that while they absolutely could market and sell his digital camera, they wouldn't, purely for the fact that it could cannibalize their film business. The mission of many within Kodak shifted from innovation to protecting the existing business model at all costs, and anything that put it at risk was to be seen as a clear and present danger. One executive actually said, "Digital is a fad that will go away." Try to imagine the mental gymnastics required to reach that conclusion while holding the world's first digital camera in your hands. Now you'd have to understand something about Kodak in 1975. They weren't just successful, they were printing money. Film margins were running at 70 to 80%. They comfortably commanded 90% of film sales and 85% of camera sales in the US. Needless to say, very few within the walls of Kodak worried about digital, and the executive leadership team felt confident they could control the pace of technological change and maintain market stability by simply suppressing digital imaging. In the early 1980s, their defensive position started bleeding into their marketing with statements like, "A world without Kodak film is unimaginable." The company that gave us Kodak moments was now adopting a subliminal fear of irrelevance, reluctant to accept that consumer loyalties could quickly shift with technological changes. A hard truth of business is that your customers will remain loyal until someone is willing to offer them a better way. One of the clearest symptoms of fear is when a brand begins celebrating the glory of its past. And that's exactly what Kodak did by marketing the nostalgia that comes with film photography. An example of this was the shift in how they talked about technology. An early slogan describing their cameras was, "Technology made simple." And now they were using headlines like, "What if you have all your memories digitally saved and the technology changes? And why risk your memories to unproven technology that could get erased?" This was from the company that had invented digital photography. The PR department piled on with statements like, "No one is going to drop their film camera and buy a computer just so they can look at their pictures." One of Kodak's senior executives at the time was said to have defended the importance of film during an interview by holding up a few pictures of his children and saying, "People will always want to hold a photograph in their hands." And the cherry on top of this company wide rejection of innovation was a campaign that warned consumers that digital photography could result in losing their precious memories. The line was, "Trust your memories to Kodak film," implying that only physical film could be trusted. This resistance to redefining their core purpose blinded the entire company to what was now a rapidly changing landscape filled with people embracing a new solution for capturing and sharing their memories, the exact same solution that Steve Sasson had invented. With companies like Sony, Canon, and Fuji beginning to dominate the digital camera market, Kodak only became more determined to reject digital technology and defend the benefits of film. This stubbornness to accept change is a perfect example of what fear does. It makes smart people say stupid things. It makes successful companies circle the wagons around dying business models. Another worry of many top Kodak executives was that a move towards digital would shift the entire power dynamic within the company. One former senior vice president recounted, "At Kodak, all the money came from film. So people were saying, look, in 5 years, this digital business will be big enough to matter, but 5 years from now, we will all be retired. Let the next generation of management deal with that." By 1996, digital camera sales reached a healthy 1 million units globally. Fuji's marketing emphasized the ease and joy of digital photography and that digital was the new face of film. And what was Kodak's response to this growing embrace of digital? You guessed it, they displayed a crisp, beautiful Kodak print next to a grainy digital photo and asked, "Do you want to trust the memories of your children to digital?" A Kodak R&D manager even said, "The quality of film will always surpass digital. There is no comparison." What's significant about the timing of this denial of digital was that it was delivered in the early 2000s, the exact same moment when digital camera sales first exceeded film camera sales on an annual basis. Digital imaging was now too big to ignore, and Kodak executives began panicking that they would dilute the value of the Kodak brand if they didn't start building digital products. Okay, let me get this straight. The very company that was so innovative that they invented digital photography, then buried it out of fear it would hurt their film business, now worried they would not be seen as innovative if they didn't embrace the innovation they invented. Anyway, this panic attack did finally get Kodak to join the digital revolution. It also added to the rushing river of distress raging already through their hallways. Kodak realized they were the ones stuck in the past, and what followed was a classic case of FOMO, the fear of missing out. And like many companies who want a quick solution, they threw money at the problem and started buying companies. they spent $58 million on a company named Photo, a digital photo sharing service. Think about that for a second. The company that invented digital photography was now desperately trying to buy its way into the digital photography business. And while a Photo was related to photography, it was primarily a service-based company, quite different from Kodak's traditional product-based model. And since fear and panic never lead to a clear strategy, Kodak failed to truly integrate the company. As Kodak watched their competitors continue to innovate and take market share, leadership began to worry about a talent exodus. So the board of directors awarded $13.5 million in retention bonuses to their executives. Ironically, many of these executives were the same leaders who had fought the digital revolution for years and had developed a deep fear of financial instability and risk-taking. This constant worry of potential financial collapse bred a culture of hesitation and inaction, a perfect storm the company could not weather. When the Kodak executives finally agreed on a digital strategy, it was too late. The market had moved on, and Kodak filed for bankruptcy in 2012 with $6.8 billion in debt. Kodak's market cap fell from $31 billion in 1997 to just $145 million in 2012. The company's failure to adapt cost Rochester, New York, Kodak's hometown, about 50,000 jobs. The once giant in the photography industry had crumbled under the weight of its own fears. To pay off their debts, Kodak was forced to sell off their 1,700 patents. The very patents that could have made them the Apple of imaging were sold to Apple, along with Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and Facebook for less than $100 million. The patents were said to be valued as high as $4.5 billion. Over the next decade, Kodak made some desperate attempts to reinvent themselves. In 2016, they launched the Kodak Ektra, a smartphone CNET reviewed as the phone Kodak shouldn't have made and a major disappointment. In 2018, they attempted a different kind of revival and launched two cryptocurrency products, the Kodak coin and the Bitcoin mining computer called the Cash Miner. Both failed. Despite the pivots, film remains the one constant of Kodak's business, supplying film to the motion picture industry to this day. I want to be clear that not everyone at Kodak was riddled with fear. There were plenty of courageous leaders who deeply understood the impact their own invention could have had on the future of the company. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, plenty of brave Kodak engineers and researchers invented digital products, but most faced skepticism and the ideas were dismissed because they threatened the precious film business. Phil Samper, Kodak's president and chief operating officer from 1986 to 1989, was an early advocate for digital technology. He fought for partnerships with electronics companies to develop digital products. But Samper left Kodak in 1989 due to disagreements with the CEO over the company's direction. After leaving, Samper stated that Kodak was hamstrung by nostalgia for its traditional film business. In the late 1990s, Willie Shea, senior VP of digital and applied imaging, put a team together that developed one of the first digital cameras aimed at consumers called the DC-210. He pushed for Kodak to embrace the digital disruption, but faced resistance from top management. He later stated that Kodak's core business model was so profitable that it became very difficult to pivot into another business model. In 1990, Don Strickland, VP of Digital Imaging, led a team that developed a digital camera with wireless sharing capabilities. But he left Kodak in 1993 after facing continuous resistance to digital initiatives. He later said, "We developed the world's first consumer digital camera, but we could not get approval to launch or sell it because of fear of the effects on the film market." Even as late as 2005, the CEO Daniel Karp tried to steer Kodak towards digital. During his tenure, he invested billions in digital technologies but faced resistance from the board and other executives. And the one who started it all, Steve Sasson. In 2008, President Barack Obama awarded him with a National Medal of Technology and Innovation, and in 2011, he was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. While we all know we shouldn't operate a company from a place of fear, I find it fascinating how many people just can't help themselves. No one at Kodak started their day by saying, "I'm going to let fear make my decisions so I can help suppress a world-changing innovation and do my part in destroying a storied company." Of course not. And yet so many of them did. That's why it's important to your career and your company to fully understand how good fear is at making great people do stupid things. To understand how fear creates chaos and how it moves and spreads and grows. By understanding how good fear is at creating failure, you will be armed with everything you need so you can see when fear is coming for you. Thank you for joining us for this episode of A Case Study in Fear. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and keep listening. There is so much more that fear can teach us. Until next time, I'm Terrace Wayner warning you that where there is fear, failure will follow. For more case studies and to better understand the impact fear can have on your company, visit fear-incorporated.com. You will also find the citations and sources used to fact check this episode.